Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls her age. While her classmates spent their afternoons at the mall or gossiping about boys, she could be found in her grandfather's backyard, practicing with an old hunting rifle he had given her for her 16th birthday. The rifle was nothing special, a worn-out Winchester Model 70 that had seen better days, but to Sarah, it was everything. Her grandfather, Miguel Martinez, was a retired Army veteran who had served 2 tours in Vietnam. He had been the one to first notice Sarah's unusual focus and steady hands when she was just 12 years old. During a family camping trip, while everyone else struggled to hit tin cans lined up on a fallen log, Sarah had picked up his rifle and hit every single target without missing once. Miguel had stared at his granddaughter in amazement, recognizing something special in her natural ability. From that day forward, Miguel became Sarah's mentor and coach. Every weekend, they would drive out to the shooting range on the outskirts of their small Texas town. The other shooters, mostly middle-aged men with expensive equipment and years of experience, would glance over at the teenage girl with curiosity and often amusement. They would watch as she carefully loaded her grandfather's old rifle, took her position, and fired shot after shot with remarkable consistency. Sarah's parents, Maria and Roberto Martinez, were initially concerned about their daughter's unusual hobby. Maria worried that shooting was too dangerous and not appropriate for a young woman. She wanted Sarah to focus on more traditional activities like dance or music. Roberto, who worked long hours at the local factory, simply wanted his daughter to concentrate on her studies so she could have better opportunities than he had. The tension at home grew as Sarah's passion for shooting intensified. She would spend hours reading about ballistics, wind patterns, and shooting techniques. Her bedroom walls were covered with charts showing bullet trajectories and weather data. Her school grades remained excellent, but her parents could see that her heart was elsewhere. At Roosevelt High School, Sarah was known as the quiet girl who sat in the back of the class and rarely spoke unless asked a direct question. She had few close friends, mainly because she spent most of her free time at the shooting range or studying marksmanship. Her classmates found her interests strange and often made jokes about the girl who preferred guns to guys. The turning point came during her junior year when Sarah learned about the Delta Force sniper program through an online military forum. She discovered that the current record for the longest confirmed shot in training exercises was held by Sergeant First Class Michael Thompson, a Delta Force sniper who had achieved a remarkable 2 847-yard shot during a training exercise at Fort Bragg. The record had stood for over 5 years, and many considered it nearly impossible to break. Sarah became obsessed with this record. She researched everything she could find about long-range shooting, studying the techniques used by the world's best snipers. She learned about the various factors that could affect a bullet's trajectory over extreme distances: wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and even the rotation of the Earth. The more she learned, the more determined she became to test her own limits. Miguel watched his granddaughter's dedication with a mixture of pride and concern. He had seen many talented shooters during his military career, but Sarah's natural ability combined with her relentless work ethic was something extraordinary. However, he also knew the challenges she would face as a young woman trying to compete in a male-dominated field. One Saturday afternoon at the local shooting range, Sarah overheard a conversation between 2 regular shooters, both retired military men named Frank and Tom. They were discussing the Delta Force record and lamenting how standards in the military had supposedly declined over the years. "Kids these days don't have what it takes," Frank was saying as he cleaned his expensive custom rifle. "They're too soft, too distracted by their phones and video games. That Delta Force record will probably stand forever because nobody has the dedication anymore." Tom nodded in agreement, especially not the girls who think they can do everything men can do. "I've seen some of these female soldiers and they just don't have the physical or mental strength for precision shooting at extreme ranges." Sarah felt her face flush with anger, but she remained silent, continuing to practice with her grandfather's old rifle. Miguel noticed her reaction and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Don't let them get to you, mija," he whispered. "Actions speak louder than words. That evening, Sarah made a decision that would change her life forever. She told her grandfather that she wanted to attempt a shot at the same distance as the Delta Force record. Miguel was initially skeptical, explaining that they didn't have access to the specialized equipment, ammunition, or training facilities that military snipers used. The conditions would have to be perfect, Miguel explained. You'd need a much better rifle, premium ammunition, and a location where you could safely attempt such a long shot. Plus, we'd need measuring equipment to verify the distance. Sarah was undeterred. She began researching locations where she could attempt the shot legally and safely. She found several private ranches in Texas that had long, open ranges suitable for extreme long-distance shooting. She also started saving money from her part-time job at a local diner to upgrade her equipment. Word of Sarah's ambitious goal eventually spread through the small shooting community in their town. The reaction was overwhelmingly skeptical and often dismissive. Many of the experienced shooters at the range made jokes about the little girl with big dreams who thought she could compete with elite military snipers. One particularly harsh critic was Earl Patterson, a former Marine who considered himself the best shot in the county. Earl owned thousands of dollars worth of precision shooting equipment and had won several local competitions. When he heard about Sarah's goal, he laughed openly. "That little girl can barely handle her grandfather's old hunting rifle," Earl said loudly enough for everyone at the range to hear. "She thinks she can break a Delta Force record? That's the funniest thing I've heard all year. Maybe she should stick to shooting at paper targets at 50 yards. The other shooters joined in the laughter, but Sarah continued practicing quietly. She had developed thick skin over the years and learned to channel criticism into motivation. Every mocking comment made her more determined to prove them wrong. Miguel began working with Sarah on the technical aspects of extreme long-range shooting. They studied weather patterns, practiced estimating wind speed and direction, and worked on breathing techniques for maintaining steady aim during extended shooting sessions. Sarah's natural ability was evident, but Miguel knew that breaking a military record would require more than just talent. Sarah's parents gradually became aware of the extent of their daughter's ambition. When they learned she was seriously planning to attempt a shot that would rival military snipers, they were both worried and confused. How had their quiet teenage daughter developed such an unusual and challenging goal? Maria sat down with Sarah one evening to have a heart-to-heart conversation. "Mija, I don't understand this fascination with guns and shooting. Why is this so important to you? You're a beautiful, intelligent young woman with so many other options." Sarah struggled to explain her passion to her mother. "It's not about the guns, Mom. It's about precision, discipline, and pushing myself to achieve something extraordinary. When I'm shooting, everything else disappears. It's just me, the target, and the challenge of making an impossible shot possible." Maria still didn't understand, but she could see the fire in her daughter's eyes. She recognized the same determination that had driven Roberto to work double shifts to provide for their family, and the same stubbornness that had helped her grandmother survive difficult times as an immigrant. As Sarah's 17th birthday approached, Miguel surprised her with news that would accelerate her plans. Through his military connections, he had arranged for them to visit a specialized shooting facility in Colorado that catered to extreme long-range enthusiasts. The facility had ranges extending beyond 3,000 yards and access to professional-grade equipment. "If you're serious about this record attempt," Miguel told his granddaughter, "then we need to do it right. This facility will give you the chance to practice under conditions similar to what military snipers face." Sarah was thrilled, but also nervous. She had never shot at distances beyond 800 yards, and the prospect of attempting shots at nearly 3 times that distance was both exciting and intimidating. She knew that this trip to Colorado would be a crucial test of whether her goal was realistic or just a teenager's impossible dream. The weeks leading up to the Colorado trip were filled with intense preparation. Sarah practiced every day after school and on weekends. She studied meteorology to better understand how weather conditions affected long-range shooting. She also began a strict physical fitness routine, knowing that maintaining steady aim for extended periods required significant physical strength and endurance. Her improvement was noticeable to everyone at the local shooting range, even her critics. Earl Patterson, who had been the most vocal skeptic, began watching Sarah's practice sessions more carefully. While he still doubted she could achieve her ultimate goal, he had to admit that her accuracy and consistency were impressive for someone her age. The day before leaving for Colorado, Sarah experienced a moment of self-doubt that had been building for weeks. Standing in her bedroom, surrounded by charts, equipment, and research notes, she wondered if she was chasing an impossible dream. The Delta Force record represented the pinnacle of military marksmanship, achieved by elite soldiers with years of training and access to the best equipment available. Miguel found her sitting on her bed, staring at a photograph of the Delta Force sniper who held the record. He sat down beside her and shared a story from his time in Vietnam about a fellow soldier who had achieved something that everyone said was impossible. "Sometimes, Mija," he said quietly, "the biggest obstacle we face is not the target itself, but the voices telling us we can't hit it. You have a gift that I've seen in very few people, military or civilian. But more importantly, you have the heart of a warrior." That night, Sarah packed her equipment with renewed confidence. Tomorrow would begin the next phase of her journey toward an impossible goal. She had no way of knowing that the trip to Colorado would not only test her shooting ability, but also attract the attention of people who could help her achieve something truly extraordinary. As she fell asleep, Sarah dreamed of making the perfect shot, a bullet flying true across an impossible distance, proving wrong everyone who had laughed at the girl with the old rifle and the impossible dream. She didn't know it yet, but her story was about to become something much bigger than even she had imagined. The Rocky Mountain Precision Shooting Facility sat nestled in a valley 30 miles outside Denver, surrounded by towering peaks that provided natural wind barriers for extreme long-range shooting. As Sarah and Miguel drove through the facility's gates, Sarah felt her heart racing with anticipation and nervousness. The facility looked nothing like the simple shooting range back home. It was clearly designed for serious professionals. Jack Harrison, the facility's owner and head instructor, met them at the main building. Jack was a former Army Ranger who had established the facility after retiring from military service. He had worked with law enforcement agencies, military units, and civilian precision shooting enthusiasts from around the world. When Miguel had called to arrange their visit, Jack had been skeptical about training a 17-year-old girl. But Miguel's military credentials and passionate endorsement had convinced him to give Sarah a chance. "So you're the young lady who thinks she can break military records?" Jack said with a slight smile as he shook Sarah's hand. His tone wasn't mocking, but there was clearly some doubt in his voice. "Your grandfather tells me you've got natural talent, but I'll be honest with you, what you're attempting is something that challenges even experienced military snipers." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I understand that, sir. I'm not expecting it to be easy. I just want the chance to see what I'm capable of." Jack nodded, appreciating her direct approach. "Fair enough. Let's start by seeing how you handle your current equipment at longer distances than you're used to. We'll work our way up gradually." The first day of training was humbling for Sarah. At 1,000 yards, a distance she had never attempted before, her shots were inconsistent and often missed the target entirely. The wind conditions in the Colorado mountains were completely different from the relatively calm conditions at her home range in Texas. She struggled to adjust for the altitude, which affected both her breathing and the bullet's trajectory. Jack watched patiently as Sarah fired shot after shot, making careful notes about her technique and the results. After an hour of frustrating misses, he called for a break. "This is normal," Jack told her as they sat in the facility's observation deck. "Long-range shooting isn't just about having a steady hand and good eyesight. It's about understanding physics, meteorology, and ballistics at a level that most people never consider. The fact that you're even hitting the target area at this distance shows promise." Over the next 3 days, Jack worked intensively with Sarah on the technical aspects of extreme long-range shooting. He taught her how to read wind patterns by observing grass movement, dust clouds, and mirage effects. He explained how temperature and humidity affected bullet flight and how to calculate adjustments for different altitudes and atmospheric pressures. More importantly, Jack introduced Sarah to professional-grade equipment. He let her test various precision rifles, high-end scopes, and specialized ammunition designed for long-range accuracy. The difference was immediately apparent. With better equipment, Sarah's shots became more consistent and accurate. "Your grandfather was right about your natural ability," Jack admitted on the third day as Sarah consistently hit targets at 1,200 yards. "But you've been handicapped by using equipment that wasn't designed for what you're trying to achieve. It's like trying to race in Formula One with a family sedan. That evening, Jack made a phone call that would change Sarah's trajectory completely. He contacted his former commanding officer, Colonel David Mitchell, who was currently stationed at Fort Bragg and oversaw advanced sniper training programs for special operations units.
"Dave, I've got a situation here that I think might interest you," Jack said during the call. "I'm working with a 17-year-old civilian who's showing remarkable potential for extreme long-range shooting.
I think she might be capable of challenging some military records." Colonel Mitchell was initially skeptical. The military took their shooting records seriously, and the idea that a teenage civilian could compete with elite soldiers seemed far-fetched. However, Jack's reputation and military record gave his words significant weight. "What kind of distances are we talking about, Jack?" Colonel Mitchell asked. "She's already hitting consistently at 1,200 yards after just 3 days of proper training. With the right equipment and conditions, I think she could attempt shots at 2,500 yards or beyond, maybe even challenge Thompson's Delta Force record." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Sergeant First Class Michael Thompson's 847-yard shot was considered one of the most impressive achievements in military marksmanship history. The idea that a civilian teenager might attempt to break it was almost unthinkable. "If she's really that good," Colonel Mitchell said finally, "I'd like to see it for myself. Can you document her abilities and send me video evidence?" The next day, Jack set up cameras and measuring equipment to record Sarah's shooting session. He had her attempt shots at various distances, starting at 800 yards and working up to 1,400 yards. Sarah was nervous knowing that her performance was being recorded for military evaluation, but she managed to maintain her composure. At 1,400 yards, nearly a mile, Sarah hit 7 out of 10 shots within the target zone. For a civilian with limited training time, this was an extraordinary achievement. Jack was impressed, and he could see why Miguel believed in his granddaughter's potential. The video footage was sent to Colonel Mitchell that evening. 2 days later, Jack received a call that surprised even him. "Jack, I've reviewed the footage with several members of our advanced marksmanship team," Colonel Mitchell said. "We're all impressed by what we've seen. We'd like to invite this young woman to Fort Bragg for evaluation by our sniper instructors. If she's really capable of what you think she is, we might be able to arrange for her to attempt an official record under proper military supervision." Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing when Jack relayed the conversation. The United States Army was inviting her to Fort Bragg, one of the most prestigious military installations in the country, to demonstrate her shooting abilities to elite sniper instructors. Miguel was equally amazed but also concerned. "Mija, this is a tremendous opportunity, but it's also a lot of pressure. These military snipers have years of training and experience. They're not going to go easy on you just because you're young or because you're a civilian." Sarah understood the gravity of the situation, but she also felt more determined than ever. This was the opportunity she had dreamed about. A chance to prove that her unconventional background and unusual dedication could compete with the military's best. The 2 weeks between the invitation and the scheduled visit to Fort Bragg passed quickly. Sarah continued training at the Colorado facility, pushing herself to attempt longer and longer shots. Jack introduced her to even more advanced techniques, including shooting at moving targets and compensating for extreme weather conditions. During one particularly challenging session, Sarah attempted a shot at 1,800 yards in windy conditions. After carefully calculating the wind speed and direction, adjusting for temperature and humidity, and accounting for the bullet's trajectory over the extended distance, she squeezed the trigger. The bullet flew true, striking the target just inches from the center. Jack lowered his spotting scope and looked at Sarah with newfound respect. "That shot would have impressed any military instructor I've ever worked with," he said quietly. "I think you might actually have a legitimate chance at that record." Word of Sarah's upcoming evaluation at Fort Bragg began to spread through military and civilian shooting communities. Online forums buzzed with discussions about the teenage girl who was claiming she could challenge elite military snipers. The reactions were mixed. Some people were supportive and curious, while others were dismissive and skeptical. Earl Patterson, Sarah's longtime critic from the Texas shooting range, learned about the Fort Bragg invitation through mutual acquaintances. His reaction was typical of many skeptics.
"This is getting ridiculous," Earl complained to anyone who would listen. "The military is wasting their time with this publicity stunt. That girl might be decent at shooting paper targets, but military snipers deal with real-world conditions and life-or-death situations. She's going to embarrass herself and waste everyone's time." However, not everyone shared Earl's pessimistic view. Some experienced shooters and military veterans began following Sarah's story with genuine interest. They recognized that exceptional talent could emerge from unexpected places, and they appreciated her dedication and unconventional path to excellence. Sarah's parents were struggling with mixed emotions as their daughter prepared for what could be the most important test of her young life. Maria was worried about the pressure and attention their daughter was receiving, while Roberto was beginning to feel proud of Sarah's unique achievements. "I still don't completely understand this shooting thing," Maria admitted to Miguel one evening, "but I can see how hard Sarah has worked for this opportunity. I just hope she doesn't get hurt if things don't go the way she hopes." Miguel reassured his daughter-in-law. "Sarah has always been special, Maria. This isn't just about shooting. It's about her character, her determination, and her willingness to pursue excellence even when others doubt her. Whatever happens at Fort Bragg, she's already proven something important about who she is." 3 days before leaving for Fort Bragg, Sarah had a conversation with Jack that helped her understand what she was really attempting. "The Delta Force record isn't just about the distance," Jack explained as they cleaned equipment after a practice session. "It represents the pinnacle of military marksmanship training, equipment, and technique. When you attempt to break that record, you're not just competing against one soldier, you're challenging an entire system that has been refined over decades." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that, but isn't that exactly why it's worth attempting? If I can achieve something similar with different training and a different background, doesn't that prove something valuable about the potential that exists outside traditional systems?" Jack smiled at her response. "That's exactly the right attitude. You're not trying to diminish what military snipers accomplish. You're trying to show that excellence can emerge from unexpected places. That's a message worth proving." The night before leaving for Fort Bragg, Sarah stood in her bedroom looking at all the research notes, charts, and equipment that had consumed her life for the past 2 years. Tomorrow would determine whether her unusual dream had been realistic or naive. She thought about all the people who had doubted her, laughed at her, or dismissed her goals as impossible. More importantly, she thought about her grandfather's unwavering support, Jack's professional training, and her own countless hours of practice and study. She had pushed herself harder than she ever thought possible, learned things that most people her age would never consider, and earned an opportunity that few civilians would ever receive. As she packed her equipment bag for the trip that could change her life forever, Sarah felt a calm confidence settling over her. She had done everything possible to prepare for this moment. Tomorrow, she would finally have the chance to see if all her hard work, dedication, and belief in herself had been justified. The girl who had been laughed at for her impossible dreams was about to face the ultimate test of whether those dreams could become reality. Fort Bragg sprawled across more than 160,000 acres of North Carolina landscape, home to some of the most elite military units in the United States. As Sarah and Miguel drove through the heavily secured gates, Sarah felt the weight of history and tradition surrounding her. This was where legends were made, where the world's finest soldiers trained and prepared for missions that could change the course of nations. Colonel David Mitchell met them at the Special Operations Command building. He was a tall, imposing man in his early 50s, with graying temples and the bearing of someone who had spent decades in positions of command. His handshake was firm, and his eyes evaluated Sarah with professional curiosity. "Miss Martinez, I'll be direct with you," Colonel Mitchell said as he escorted them through the facility. "What you're attempting has generated significant interest throughout our sniper community. Some of my instructors are genuinely curious about your abilities, while others are skeptical that a civilian can compete with military-trained marksmen. You're going to have to prove yourself to some very demanding critics." Sarah nodded, feeling the familiar flutter of nervousness mixed with determination. "I understand, sir. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I'm prepared to demonstrate what I've learned." The first person they met was Master Sergeant Rebecca Torres, one of only a handful of female sniper instructors in the Army. Torres had earned her position through exceptional skill and had trained hundreds of soldiers in advanced marksmanship techniques. Her presence immediately put Sarah at ease. Here was someone who understood the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated field. "I've seen the video footage from Colorado," Torres told Sarah. "Your technique is solid, but shooting at Fort Bragg is different from shooting at a civilian facility. Our standards are higher, our expectations are greater, and the pressure is unlike anything you've experienced." The evaluation process began with basic marksmanship tests at relatively short distances. Sarah was required to demonstrate proficiency with various military-issue rifles and scopes, shooting at targets from 300 to 800 yards under different conditions. Several sniper instructors observed her performance, taking notes and discussing her technique among themselves. At 500 yards, Sarah hit 9 out of 10 shots within the target's highest scoring ring. At 700 yards, she maintained 7 out of 10 shots in the same zone. The military observers were quietly impressed but reserved judgment for the longer distances that would truly test her abilities. Sergeant First Class Michael Thompson, the current holder of the Delta Force long-range record, arrived on the second day of evaluation. Thompson was a quiet, intense man in his early 30s who had achieved legendary status within the special operations community. His 847-yard shot had been made under perfect conditions with state-of-the-art equipment, and many considered it the pinnacle of military marksmanship achievement. "I heard there's a young lady here who thinks she can break my record," Thompson said with a slight smile as he was introduced to Sarah. "I have to admit, I'm curious to see what you can do. That shot took me years of training and perfect conditions to achieve." Sarah felt intimidated meeting the man whose record she hoped to surpass. But Thompson's demeanor was friendly rather than competitive. He seemed genuinely interested in her abilities rather than threatened by her ambitions. The third day brought the real test. Sarah was taken to Fort Bragg's longest-range shooting facility, where she would attempt shots at distances approaching Thompson's record. The facility's range extended nearly 3,000 yards across open terrain, with targets placed at various distances to test different aspects of long-range shooting. Weather conditions were far from ideal. A steady crosswind of 15 miles per hour was gusting across the range, and intermittent cloud cover was creating changing light conditions that would affect target visibility. Several of the military instructors suggested postponing the evaluation until conditions improved, but Sarah requested permission to attempt the shots anyway. "Real-world conditions are rarely perfect," Sarah explained to Colonel Mitchell. "If I can only shoot accurately in ideal weather, then I'm not really ready for this level of challenge." Her first attempts at 2,000 yards were unsuccessful. The combination of wind, changing light, and the pressure of being observed by elite military snipers affected her concentration. After missing the target entirely with her first 3 shots, Sarah requested a brief break to recalibrate her approach. Master Sergeant Torres approached Sarah during the break. "You're overthinking this," she observed. "I can see you calculating and recalculating every variable. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts and training rather than trying to solve every problem intellectually." Sarah took Torres's advice to heart. When she returned to the firing line, she spent less time calculating and more time feeling the conditions around her. She observed the grass movements, felt the wind patterns on her face, and allowed her trained instincts to guide her adjustments. Her fourth shot at 2,000 yards struck the outer ring of the target. The military observers exchanged glances. Hitting a target at that distance under current conditions was an impressive achievement for any shooter. Her fifth and sixth shots landed progressively closer to the center, demonstrating her ability to adjust and improve under pressure. "Let's see what she can do at 2,500 yards, Colonel Mitchell decided. At 2,500 yards, just 347 yards short of Thompson's record distance, the target appeared impossibly small through the scope. Sarah took several minutes to study the conditions, noting how the wind patterns changed at different points along the bullet's trajectory. She calculated adjustments for the bullet drop over the extended distance and the effects of the Coriolis force caused by the Earth's rotation. Her first shot at 2,500 yards missed the target, but the spotting team reported that it had passed just to the left of the target area. Sarah made a minor windage adjustment and fired again. The second shot struck the target's outer ring, eliciting surprised comments from several observers. "That's a hell of a shot," one of the sniper instructors muttered to his colleague. "I've seen experienced soldiers struggle to hit anything at that distance." Word of Sarah's performance was spreading throughout the Fort Bragg sniper community. Soldiers who weren't directly involved in the evaluation began finding reasons to visit the range area, curious to see the teenage civilian who was reportedly challenging military marksmanship records. On the fourth day, Colonel Mitchell made an announcement that surprised everyone present. Based on what we've observed over the past 3 days, we're prepared to give Miss Martinez an opportunity to attempt an official record shot. The conditions aren't perfect, but they're within acceptable parameters for a legitimate attempt. Sarah felt her heart racing as she realized what was being offered. This was the moment she had trained for, dreamed about, and sacrificed for over the past 2 years. She would have one opportunity to attempt a shot at 2,847 yards, the exact distance of Thompson's current record. The preparation for the record attempt took several hours. Military technicians set up precise measuring equipment to verify the exact distance. Weather monitoring devices tracked wind speed, direction, temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure. High-definition cameras were positioned to record the attempt from multiple angles. Sarah was given access to the same type of rifle and ammunition that Thompson had used for his record shot. A custom-built precision rifle, chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum with a high-end telescopic scope. The equipment was worth more than most people's cars and represented the pinnacle of long-range shooting technology. As word spread about the record attempt, an unexpected crowd gathered at the range. Military personnel from various units found excuses to be in the area, and even some off-duty soldiers came to witness the historic attempt. The pressure was immense, but Sarah tried to focus on the techniques and mental preparation that had brought her to this moment. Miguel stood beside his granddaughter as she prepared for the shot. "Remember everything we've practiced, mija," he said quietly. "Trust your training, trust your instincts, and don't let the pressure change who you are." Master Sergeant Torres approached with final advice. "I've been watching you for 4 days now, and I believe you have the skill to make this shot. The question is whether you can handle the pressure and maintain your focus when it matters most. Champions aren't made by perfect conditions. They're made by performing when everything is on the line." Sarah took her position behind the rifle as the crowd fell silent. Through the scope, the target at 2,847 yards was barely visible, appearing as a tiny speck against the backdrop of distant trees. She began her final preparations, checking wind conditions one last time and making microscopic adjustments to her scope settings. The silence on the range was complete, except for the subtle sounds of wind moving through grass and the distant calls of birds. Sarah controlled her breathing, allowing her heart rate to slow and her muscles to relax. She had made thousands of shots in practice, but none had carried the significance of this single moment. "Range is clear," announced the range safety officer. "Shooter, you may fire when ready." Sarah settled deeper into her shooting position, feeling the rifle become an extension of herself. She observed the wind patterns one final time, noting how the mirage effects indicated air movement at different distances. All of her training, all of her study, and all of her determination focused down to this single moment. She squeezed the trigger with the same smooth, consistent pressure she had practiced thousands of times. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, and the bullet began its 3-second journey across nearly 3 miles of North Carolina landscape. Through her scope, Sarah watched the bullet's trajectory, noting how it curved slightly due to wind drift and dropped significantly due to gravity and air resistance. For a moment, that felt like an eternity. The outcome hung in the balance. "Hit!" called the spotter, his voice cutting through the silence like a lightning bolt. "Center target!" The crowd erupted in amazement and applause. Sarah had not only matched Thompson's record, she had hit dead center of the target at 2,847 yards, achieving something that many considered nearly impossible even for elite military snipers. Thompson was the first to reach Sarah as she stood up from the firing position. "That was an incredible shot," he said, extending his hand with genuine respect. "You've just joined a very exclusive club. I'm honored to share this record with someone who earned it the way you did. Miss Martinez, what you've accomplished today represents one of the finest displays of marksmanship I've witnessed in 25 years of military service.
You've not only demonstrated exceptional skill, but you've also shown that dedication and talent can emerge from anywhere." As news of Sarah's achievement spread, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The girl who had been laughed at and dismissed by so many people had just proved that impossible dreams could become reality through determination, proper training, and unwavering belief in oneself. Earl Patterson, watching news coverage of the record shot from his home in Texas, sat in stunned silence. The same young woman he had mocked for her impossible ambitions had just achieved something that placed her among the most skilled marksmen in the world. Back at Fort Bragg, as Sarah was congratulated by military personnel and interviewed by reporters who had quickly arrived to cover the story, she thought about her journey from a quiet teenager with an old hunting rifle to someone whose achievement would be remembered in military history. Miguel watched his granddaughter handle the attention with the same grace and humility she had shown throughout her training. The little girl who had once hit tin cans in his backyard had grown into a young woman whose dedication had carried her to heights that few would ever reach. Sarah's story became inspiration for countless others who dared to pursue seemingly impossible goals. She had proved that excellence wasn't limited by traditional paths, that determination could overcome skepticism, and that sometimes the most extraordinary achievements came from the most unexpected places. The girl they had laughed at had silenced every doubter with a single perfect shot that traveled nearly 3 miles to hit its mark. In doing so, she had not only broken a military record, but had also broken barriers and opened doors for others who dreamed of achieving the impossible.